What if the future of artificial intelligence wasn't built by people who think like the Silicon Valley stereotype, but by people whose brains are wired completely differently? What if ADHD, autism, dyslexia, neurodiversity that's been penalized in traditional education and corporate structure is actually the competitive advantage in an AI driven world? Palantir CEO just said exactly that, and today's guest has been living it. Welcome to Data Science with Sam. Your host, Sam, coming here with another guest, Mark Stiltner, the Senior Director of Content and Web Marketing at Rapyd, to discuss about the topic. Mark works for a fintech unicorn powering payments across 100 plus countries. Mark has a background in journalism and advertising from the University of Colorado Boulder, and he spent years in corporate marketing leadership. But what makes Mark's story compelling is that he's openly talking about his ADHD, how AI tools unlock something fundamental about how his brain works, and how he thinks neurodiversity is being systematically underestimated as a strategic advantage in AI driven roles. And that's what we're going to pin down in today's episode. Mark, welcome to the show. I'm really happy to have this conversation with you today.
Hey, Sam. Thanks a lot for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to talk.
So let's start with the foundation. Mark, you have described yourself as off the charts ADHD before AI tools entered your life. So what was the experience actually like?
Yeah, I think my experience is the same as a lot of people who have ADHD. Um, there's parts of it that are good and parts of it that are bad. I think Alex Karp, you'd mentioned him. Something that really stood out to me when I heard his quote was this idea that the future belongs to divergent thinkers. And I think that's somewhat true for me. I've always felt that I have ideas and that my superpowers really are the ability to hyper focus on things that do really interest me and to have kind of unconventional solutions to problems. But, that comes with challenges too. We live in a world, I think, that is built for people who think in straight lines. And when you have ADHD, you're kind of all over the place. And so you need systems in place that help to allow your strengths to come out. And building those systems often means working twice as hard as somebody else to achieve the same things, because maybe you're getting up extra early in the morning so you can get into that hyper focused state before the messages and the meetings start coming in and distracting you. Maybe you're working late at night. Whatever it is that you do to find kind of that path that works for you. But with AI coming in, it sort of works as a complementary factor and does a lot of those things that you maybe don't do well better than you, and allows those things that you do really well to come out. And so for me, it was this kind of transformative moment where I was like, oh, I can still work twice as hard because that is the habit that I built, but now I'm doing 10 times as much.
Fascinating. Thanks, Mark. It just sounds like AI didn't only give you new ideas, it collapsed the execution gap. Like you can achieve so many things by utilizing AI. There's so many ideas probably at the back burner that you can execute now because you have a powerful tool like AI to execute that. So thanks for sharing your journey and how AI kind of like helping you with executing some of your thought processes. Now, pivoting to my next question, when did you have your first aha moment that AI wasn't just a productivity tool for you, but something that specifically unlocked how your ADHD brain works? Like when you think that AI can help you become the superhuman.
Um, so I think it was really not very long after I first started using it that I realized how complementary it was to my skill set. I first started using ChatGPT when it kind of came out onto the scene. It sort of exploded around 2002. And I started playing with it very, very early. I think I want to say it was like the Da Vinci model. Um, I'm not,
Yeah, it was the Da Vinci
yeah,
model. I mean, that was probably the first model was available on the playground in late 2022. Yeah.
yeah. So that's when I first started playing with it. And I originally actually got into it with a group of other tech enthusiasts that I get together and play Dungeons and Dragons with. So I'm really into tabletop role playing and playing games like D&D and other role playing games, building supplements and rule systems. And I play with a lot of guys that we got together during COVID, during the lockdown, and started like doing that as a way to spend some time together and do something fun on like a Thursday night. And it was, database administrators and developers and myself, all kind of, tech geek people that were doing this. And we discovered ChatGPT together and started playing with it. We coded up a little like text to speech, speech to text module because ChatGPT couldn't do it at the time. And we brought it into one of our games and had it play as a character.
Wow.
And we recorded it. It's actually on my personal blog, the publishing company that I have, dungeonmatters.com. It's actually the first blog post. So you can go and look at that video if you want to see
Yeah,
old
yeah. Can you
school
share the link for
AI.
our viewers or listeners? I mean, they would love to read that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We can put it in the show notes. The site's dungeonmatters.com. But it was just so intuitive and came to different solutions than a human would come to for a lot of problems in the game that I just became absolutely fascinated with it. So I just started sort of working with it with all kinds of different projects, side writing projects, work projects, whatever I could point it towards, I would. And I found that I could spend a lot of time working with it and maintain a very high degree of focus on a project. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it's basically if you have ADHD, one of the theories on the cause is actually a lack of dopamine. So it's you're not getting that dopamine fix and you're kind of looking for things that will reinforce it. That's why things like, screen time can also be so addictive for somebody with ADHD. But AI is sort of like a dopamine dispensing sidekick that actually makes you more productive because it feels like you're winning in a casino when you spend 3 hours and come up with a workflow automation for sending out emails, or you're trying to crank out a blog post and you do it in an hour instead of 6. It's amazing to get those instant answers, that instant gratification, and it builds this reinforcement cycle where you can sit there and just like work on something for very, very, very long periods of time and be highly productive. I think the other thing that I realized was that it allowed me to be nonlinear in my thinking and work as a second brain that maintained the thread. So if I
Mhm.
wanted to jump 2 steps ahead in the process, it knew exactly what I had done before, and when I came back, it could connect the dots. So it really was lending itself to the way that I was working, and I was finding myself jumping ahead of other people in terms of the learning curve of both how AI works and some of the processes that I was using it for. So I actually started doing training, like training CMOs and doing workshops and even doing them for like my own team, the marketing team within Rapyd, and just like teaching people how to use AI. And what I found was people were a bit hesitant and maybe had a harder time getting into it. And I think the reason why is if you look at this thing and go, crap, this is going to do my job for me or take my job, you meet it with fear or hesitancy. But if you've been sitting there going, I have to work twice as hard to do my job and this makes it easier, all of a sudden you really embrace it. So I do think that for people along a broad range of neurodiversity, it suddenly becomes empowering. But
Yeah.
for me, it was discovering how much more productive it made me, how it could help me sort of maintain my focus and, crank through things that used to take me a much longer time that I realized just how powerful of a tool it was.
Yeah. I mean, just to, for our listeners, have you guys heard of someone who actually became unproductive, even probably just got laid off because that person started using AI? Well, I haven't seen any examples yet, so I would love to know about that. So going back to your thoughts on that, Mark, definitely. I mean, thanks for sharing that. What are your pivotal points that kind of like took you to this AI journey, and like you started utilizing AI that kind of increased your productivity 5x, 10x, and like you said, like it's kind of like something that's going to make you think non-linear term, and also it's kind of having an extra assistant that's gonna like keep you checked. If something that going out of the rail, it's gonna help you to kind of like get back to that track and kind of like keep going. So thanks for sharing that. Before I jump on to the next question, I would like to remind my listeners that if you really like my contents, if you like listening to some of my episode, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and also share my audio contents, the podcast episode, with your network whom you find fit to listen to some of these episodes as well. Now, moving on to my third question. And this is something, Mark, you initially we started discussion about this topic based on this particular question, which is related to Palantir, as they recently launched a targeted recruiting program for ADHD talent in AI roles. So from your personal experience, do you think the enterprise world is finally starting to see neurodiversity as a competitive advantage rather than a liability?
I think it's starting to happen. When I read Alex Karp's quote that essentially the future belongs to neurodivergent thinkers, I think is the way he put it, and then read that program that they had at Palantir, that was also an aha moment for me. Not in that, oh, AI can make a difference for me, but in giving me some context as to, oh, other people are experiencing the same thing that I'm experiencing. And this is probably a pretty big deal. And that's when I really started diving into this and investigating it and seeing that there's other literature, there's other studies. This is a big thing. And I think where we are right now is still at the very early stages. It's like in the Industrial Revolution. There were these moths on trees, right? They had like these white moths on white trees, and occasionally there was a black moth that would get eaten by a bird. And then the Industrial Revolution happened, and all the trees turned black from soot, and all of a sudden all the white moths got eaten, and all the black moths were thriving. And we're in a world right now that just changed colors. So all of a sudden, I think the people that maybe had a harder time in business, or maybe they had a skill set that wasn't just quite a perfect match to the way the world is working, are all of a sudden finding themselves in an environment where they could thrive. And I think we're at early days of that. But I think what you're going to see is that people who are in that position start writing the new script for the future and the ways of working and building systems that work better for people who can think unconventionally. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have ADHD to be an unconventional thinker, but I think it does open up a world for all kinds of unconventional thinkers to really thrive and succeed.
Now, that's a really good way to put it, like unconventional thinker. Like there are a lot of people, even they try to think out of the box, but they do not have the bandwidth or enough toolkits to execute that to like something, right? And I think AI is kind of helping them to bring their ideas to fruition, right? And I can share from my personal experiences that I always wanted to build a tracker, an app that can track the ISS or the rocket launch or something related to space. Never managed time. I don't have that expertise with working on TypeScript or RS, what is it called? The CSS, JavaScript to build a website, right? So I remember just a night before Artemis launch, I went to Replit AI agent, kind of like gave him some, gave it some bunch of prompts, like what's kind of like the app would look like and how we're going to track and how I can connect my app to NASA tracker. And it just came up with everything within an hour. So now I actually have a fully like a production standard NASA app that's kind of gives me all the NASA news as well as its track ISS path. And I'm going to keep that app. And I'm probably going to keep that forever, and it's going to track all the Artemis projects going to come in next 5 to 10 years. So because I vested a lot of interest in space, but never had the chance to build something that I can call myself my own. So AI is kind of helping that. So it just like if you have an idea, out of the box idea, you never implemented it, try AI, and probably AI is going to help you to execute that. I think that's probably the message that you're trying to relay. So yeah, again, don't try to take the discussion to a different tangent, but I wanted to share my experience as you mentioned about that. Like we all out of the box thinker, and I think AI is kind of helping us to augment our thinking process.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. What it does is I think it works well for people who are focused on outcomes as opposed to doing something a certain way. So, with your app, you're just focused on the outcome, making a cool app. It doesn't matter how you build it. And in marketing, a lot of times it's about the outcome. It's, does it work? Does it resonate with the customer? Does it generate leads? Does it generate sales? And a lot of times we find ourselves following a recipe to do that. And when you do that, you get stuck and you stop seeing other opportunities. When you have the second brain that helps you out, it frees you to think more unconventionally. It frees you to focus on the outcome, and have another tool that can help you find new ways to get there. And I think it's a powerful way of working, regardless of who you are.
Yep. Love the way the conversation going, Mark, and I'm pretty sure our listeners also getting more glued into this episode. Now, moving on to my next question. So there's a UK government study found that neurodiverse workers were 25% more satisfied with AI assistants than neurotypical counterparts. So what do you think like explains the gap? Anything that you can share from your personal experience?
Yeah, I think the takeaway, I read that study,
Mhm.
and I think the takeaway for me from this study was that it's not even that AI makes you more satisfied, it's that it actually makes you, I think the reason they're more satisfied is because they're able to be more effective.
Uh-huh.
Again, kind of goes back to what I said, that if you feel like AI is coming for your job, you hate it. But if you've spent your career working twice as hard to get to where you are, you're going to love this thing.
Yep.
And I think that's what you're seeing there is that ability to allow people, despite whatever their way of working is, to be more effective at their job. And again, I don't want to, the ADHD thing is really interesting to me because it's my personal story, but lots of different people have different stories and different ways of working and frustrations at their job. And I think when you look at AI and say, not just like, I need to know this so I can keep my job, or, you know, I need to figure out the next big software application. If you just look at it and say, what are the weaknesses that I have, or what are the frustrations that I have, and how can this help fill those gaps so that I can be better at the creativity, the atypical problem solving, the intuition, the things that humans are going to continue to bring to the table, that's where it unleashes its capability. But I think when you've been stuck working extra hard, you're maybe the first to notice that and to have it feel like it's taking limitations away from you.
Yep. No, totally agree with you on that. I mean, it's just like the ADHD definitely like that's kind of like taking me to my next question is that the ADHD brings specific like a personality traits that are genuinely valuable, such as hyperfocus, pattern recognition, and high risk tolerance. So, in your opinion, which of those specifically has AI amplified for you in your role building and leading AI teams, especially in the marketing industry where we are more driven by outcome than the process of generating the outcome?
I mean, I think all of them. To go down your list, high risk tolerance. Again, being an early adopter, being willing to go and build things and try new things, it frees you up to do that. So it lends itself there. I do think that the single biggest benefit for me, at least, is unleashing hyperfocus. Even before AI was out there, people refer to hyperfocus as kind of the ADHD superpower. And it really is. There's numerous studies that show that people with ADHD, when they're engaged in work, can actually be more productive than somebody who's more neurotypical. So the description attention deficit disorder is a little bit misleading because you can actually have more attention and more focus and more productivity on things that engage you. But harnessing that hyper focus can be hard. It can be fleeting. It's not something you can just turn on and off. And AI really, it makes it more accessible. If you can find some structured working time, you sort of have everything in the world at your fingertips to help you explore whatever idea that you have. It's just bringing you those answers, and that allows you to put that hyper focus to work and to be incredibly productive with it. So I found that's a skill that it's unleashed the most. I think that's why, I mentioned the company, the side publishing company. I started that to publish tabletop role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, adventures, things like that,
Mhm.
as a way to learn AI so I could put it to work in my regular career. So I could go from publishing games and things like that to making blog posts and case studies and web pages and all of that content. And I'd put those lessons to work. But in the process of doing that, I've written over 50 books that I published. And on the main marketplace that I publish on, I actually have 3 of them that are bestsellers on the marketplace DriveThruRPG. So these are like fully illustrated, like, books that are several hundred pages long. They're the kind of thing that it would take a team of 10 more than a year to do before. And now one person can crank these out in much less time. So I've really seen that ability to focus on something that you're interested in just get totally unleashed and push me to levels of productivity and innovation that I just would not be able to attain on my own.
Yep. No, totally. I mean, like you mentioned that, the speed of like preparing something, generating something using AI is like enormous, like you just shared your personal experience of publishing multiple books within a short time frame, which would have taken probably years and years to write by yourself or, even without utilizing AI or any sort of automation processes. So I think that's what like in AI kind of like unlock a potential that we probably never kind of like tapped into. It's like we are kind of like exploring uncharted territory of our brain power or some ability that we never know that it exists, right? And that's the fascinating thing that AI kind of like helping us to explore. So now, since you mentioned about book publication, and you also told me that you are writing an article and interviewing experts on this topic. So, if I ask you that, what's the most surprising thing an expert has told you so far about why ADHD and AI seems to be a natural pairing?
For me, it was the dopamine revelation. I think I mentioned earlier, it's kind of like a
Mhm.
dopamine dispensing assistant. I didn't realize that neurochemically, one of what they believe are the causes of ADHD is like a deficit of dopamine. And a lot of people think of dopamine as like the feel good drug in your brain, but it's actually a lot more than that. It doesn't necessarily make you feel good. It doesn't necessarily lead to euphoria. But what it does do is it teaches your brain to reinforce patterns. So it's really a way for you to learn how to do things and to positively reinforce, positive actions. So it's a teaching tool. And if you have a deficit of that, it can be hard to focus on specific things. So seeing these instant outcomes, getting these immediate results, it really does play into that mindset. And so learning that was sort of an aha moment for me. I think that's the most interesting thing. And what it's really led me to is I've actually got a conversation scheduled with the guidance counselor at my son's school. My son has ADHD like me. He goes to a private school where they do a very good job of accommodating to different kids' learning styles. And what you see is like amazing kids who are going off to incredible schools and incredible careers because they weren't forced to think in straight lines. And so I want to have a conversation with him about what he's seeing in the school systems. And really, while we're talking about this for work, I think there's a even bigger advantage to be had in school. In early education, like elementary school, middle school, I think that's where I had the toughest time. In corporate America, I'd already kind of figured out my ways of working. But early on, actually, they did not know what to do with me. Actually, like late in elementary school and middle school, I spent half of my day in the gifted and talented program and half of my day in special ed because they did not know if I was too fast or too slow. And the truth is, it was a little of both. Everybody's brains develop at different speeds, and there's some things that I was ahead of the curve on, and some things I was behind the curve on. And having people that gave me a flexible way of learning really set me up for success. And so I'd like to see situations where obviously schools don't want kids finding out the answers to tests with AI, but it would be great if they could figure out ways to make AI part of the assignment or to make, creating and working with AI to come up with something bigger than what AI could do on its own, part of the learning and give kids the flexibility to use AI within their own learning structure to get the understanding and the capability and the competence to go out there and execute. Because I think what matters isn't the path, what matters is the results. And when you take that focus view of let's work on helping people come up with the best work, not focus on how they get there, you really unleash a lot of hidden talent.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And for our listeners, AI is basically like focusing more on the outcome than the path of how you are getting into that outcome. And I think at the end of the day, that's all matters, right? We are living in a result driven world, right? In the corporate and industry world, we always think about our quarterly profit margin and stuff. So if AI unlocks our true potential to maximize those returns, so of course, this is where we have to expand our thought process and utilize AI to get something. And I believe the new generation, like you give an example of your kid, I think they also have. I mean, of course, they are more tech savvy than us. Yeah, I mean, that definitely, like it's a kind of a study. I think I read something that once you go generation after generation, they become more savvy from technology wise. So they would be probably be able to unlock AI's more potential in future. We don't even know. It's just we have to give them the platform so they can utilize that. Of course, we need to make sure that they are also gonna utilize their human intelligence and couple that with AI intelligence. And that's where we have schools and education system, but we also can't just, keep them away from AI, that one way or another, they're going to utilize AI either for their academic life or professional or personal life, right? We just have to make sure how we can make them a better use of AI. So that will truly impact our future generation. So yeah, I mean, fascinating. Thanks, Mark, for sharing your story, especially with sharing your kid's story and how what your thought process around it. Now, I'm going to actually talk a little bit about your publishing company because as you have a publishing company and you kind of like stepped into that AI transformational leadership role, I would definitely ask you to share your publishing company website so I can put that in the show notes in the blog description for our listeners to kind of go in and just read some of the books that you already published. So now on a similar note, I wanted to ask you about this. Do you think this entrepreneurial, linear thinking of an ADHD mind is actually better suited for navigating AI's pace of change than traditional linear thinkers? I mean, have you gone through some kind of a personal experience where you compare yourself with someone else who struggled to adapt to AI compared to the way you've been doing in past few years?
Absolutely. In fact, since we're talking about ADHD, I think the thing that has the worst case of ADHD is AI. And I say that because every time I learn a new skill, or I think I've got my hands wrapped around what's going on, something changes. So it is just this constant pace of change with AI. And I think if you're somebody who has ADHD, you're kind of used to winging it a little bit. I think that I've naturally found myself to be successful in corporate America by not by following the rules, but by choosing environments where the rules constantly change. So what I mean by that is I've worked in advertising agencies that focus on early stage technology companies, B2B tech startups, businesses where pivoting the business model is par for the course. So if you're only comfortable following a plan and you're not comfortable when that plan falls apart, you're just not going to do well there. And AI is very similar to that right now. I can cite a couple of examples just in the last couple months. I just finished writing all these markdown files for Claude so that I've got these reference files that it can use for some of the skills that I'm training. And then I just read an article today, just today, that was sent to me right when I finished these markdown files that says Claude engineers are now using HTML instead of Markdown. Here's why. And so I'm going, crap, okay, I guess I got to go figure that out now. And I'm in a situation where I'm perfectly happy building something that's going to be obsolete in a month if I feel like I learned a new skill that's going to make me better at the next challenge. So, that's totally fine. So AI is constantly changing. And I think that honestly, having an ADHD mindset of like, you don't care that the plan changed because you probably didn't read the plan anyway, it really lends itself to that space.
Yeah. No, totally agree with that. And like just to move on to the next question, because I really like the way the things are going. And I wanted to kind of like, pick your brain on something which pretty prevalent right now in the industry world, like how we going to leverage AI to maximize our ROI and stuff. Now I'm going to actually take that question to a different tangent. And I'm going to ask you that if companies actively started recruiting and designing AI workflows for ADHD style recognition, then what does that future look like and how far away is it? And to add to that, do you think that's going to impact our ROI and we can actually maximize more benefit from AI by implementing some ADHD style cognition program? So I just wanted to kind of like ask that. So
Yeah.
what's your take on that?
So I think what Palantir did was a
Mhm.
bold move. And I think it was the right move at the right time. But I don't think it's the way that the industry should go as a whole. In other words, I don't think the right move is ever saying, we're going to choose a certain cognitive profile and optimize for that. Instead, kind of goes back to what I said before. I think what businesses should do is optimize for results and allow whatever cognitive profiles happen to thrive best in those scenarios to surface and succeed. AI allows organizations to provide more flexibility than they might have in the past. People who could never develop can now build applications people who maybe couldn't write creatively can now output in, better prose. People who weren't experts on the product can now tap into that and leverage it. The lines are starting to blur. And I think the companies that are really going to succeed are the ones that become comfortable with flexibility and a little bit more ambiguity in the processes and allow the outcomes to drive the direction. So
Yeah.
it's not about if you're going to optimize for people with ADHD or neurotypical or anything else. It's about putting the flexibility in place to allow whatever comes out naturally to thrive.
Yeah. No, love the way I love the way you actually kind of put it. Because at the end of the day, it's about the flexibility and the ROI and those kind of factors that the industry and the companies are usually look for. It doesn't matter whether they have an ADHD program or not. At the end of the day, as long as they are unlocking the true potential of AI and letting their employees to capitalize on that, I mean, they can definitely go further in their AI journey. So totally agree with you on that. So we kind of like coming towards the business end of the episode. Now, before we wrap up, Mark, I would like to ask you, especially for our listeners, do you have any tips, any suggestions that you want to share with the listeners with the ADHD symptom, and they also want to like pivot into their AI
Mm.
career?
I mean, for me, the number one tip is start building. To make this really work, take a vacation, take a week off of work, go take a passion project and use AI for it and just spend that time, get those hours under your belt working with it, because there's no amount of classes or programs that can the hands-on experience. And if you don't know how to use it, if you don't know how to get started on doing something with it, the crazy thing is you can just ask it. You can just go into Claude and say, I want to build an app. How do I do that? And it'll start working you through the process. So start building. That's the most important thing. And then the second is don't be afraid of doing things a certain way. The cool thing is nobody should be following a manual right now because we are still in the early days of writing the manual. So don't feel like it's not like, Python coding or something where you have to follow a process. Like, you're helping to invent the processes right now just by doing it. So don't be afraid to break the rules. You're writing the rules.
No, thanks, Mark. Thanks for your suggestion. I'm pretty sure some of our listeners took notes of it and they will be able to apply it in their professional or personal life. So, Mark, this conversation has been exactly what I hoped for. Thank you for taking your time and being open about the topic that you want to discuss with our listeners. And also, we kind of, whether it's ADHD mind or non-ADHD mind, one thing we definitely align on is that whatever the thought process you have, AI is here to kind of expand on that. Just try AI. The ideas that you had in your back burners, you never utilize, never gotten a chance to use that. Try, give it a shot to utilize AI to implement those ideas and see how it can help you to gain productivity or do something that you never thought of like doing. Maybe you're gonna actually to explore more aha moments that our guest Mark, experienced plenty of times in the beginning of his AI journey. Before we wrap up, anything else, Mark, you want to share with our listeners?
Well, you mentioned that you'd give me a chance to plug my publishing company a little bit. So I'll share one project that I've been working on recently that I think is pretty cool, which is I've been working on essentially a prompt that allows you to take any kind of short story, book, any scenario that you want, plug it into it, and it repurposes it into like an interactive novel where you're the protagonist. So kind of like this old choose your own adventure novels from back in the day that you probably read when you were a kid growing up, but in a totally open world where you can do whatever you want and it maintains the structure of the story and the narrative and the world and the characters so you can really explore it. So I'm calling them solo AI RPGs, and I'm creating and selling those online right now, and they're pretty cool. So that's been something I've had a lot of fun making. Right now it's all text. The next stage I think is to bring in some graphics and to make them more immersive experiences. But to me, that's one of the places where AI, I think, is going to go, is this place where we're not just passively interacting with content, but it's going to be almost more like a holodeck experience where you're plugging in a program and maybe it's not three-dimensional and you're interacting with people, but you do take more of an active role in the content, not just in video games, but in books and movies and in any media like that. So I'm sort of excited about building to that and excited to see where that goes.
Thanks, Mark. And definitely share any links or materials that I can put in the show notes for our listeners to take a look at it. Now, for my listeners, if you are ADHD or neurodivergent and hearing this episode resonates with you, the message is clear. Your brain isn't broken. It might actually be exactly what's needed for where AI is heading. I'm your host, Sam. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and share my Podbean episodes with your networks. And I will see you in the next episode. Thank you.